Imagine this: a quiet night at home, everything familiar. Until your wife, dressed to kill, says she's meeting another man and won't be back until morning. What would you do? For Harvey, that moment changed everything. Betrayal, secrets, and a love that's unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. As the lines between trust and revenge blur, both Harvey and Betsy find themselves in a dangerous game of power and control. But in the end, will there be anything left to save? Find out in this gripping tale of love pushed to its breaking point.
I sat back in my armchair. The kind of night that usually felt so routine unfolding in front of me. A beer in my hand, the baseball game playing softly on the TV. Everything about the evening seemed normal, comfortable even. But as I took another sip, something inside me shifted. A quiet discomfort crept in, though I couldn't place it yet. Betsy, my wife, had hurried upstairs moments ago. Nothing unusual about that, but tonight, there was something different, something off. I tried to shake it, convincing myself it was just another evening at home. But the peace I had felt was already unraveling. It didn't take long for the silence of the house to break. The sharp sound of Betsy's heels echoed down the staircase, a sound that rarely filled our evenings anymore. My eyes instinctively drifted toward the hallway, and when she appeared, my breath hitched. She wasn't wearing the usual loose-fitting clothes she liked to lounge around in. No, tonight, she had slipped into something far more deliberate. A tight, short dress clung to her in a way that left little to the imagination. It was a look I hadn't seen in a long time, and my chest tightened with a mix of desire and dread. I could feel the tension building in the air as she approached me. There was no warmth in her gaze, no trace of the affection we once shared. Instead, there was a sharpness, an edge that cut through me. The smell of her perfume lingered in the space between us, rich, intoxicating, but it only made the knot in my stomach grow tighter. I could already tell that this was no ordinary evening. My hand gripped the beer bottle a little harder as she finally opened her mouth to speak. Her words sliced through the room with brutal clarity. "I'm going out to meet another man." For a moment, the world stopped. I couldn't process what she had just said. It felt like a bad joke, a twisted attempt to get a reaction out of me. But her eyes, cold and unblinking, told me it was no joke. My heart sank heavy and raw. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, questions, accusations, but none of them made it to my lips. All I could do was sit there, frozen, watching as my quiet, comfortable night turned into something much darker. Something that felt like the beginning of an end I hadn't seen coming. When Betsy stepped fully into the living room, it was impossible not to notice the transformation. She wasn't just wearing a different outfit. She had become someone else entirely in that moment. The dress was tight, hugging her curves in a way that screamed confidence. And yet it was a look in her eyes that really hit me. A look that was bold, unapologetic. As she stood there, everything about her was a provocation, daring me to react. And still, I couldn't find the words. Before I could even ask what the hell was going on, she answered a question I hadn't dared to form yet. "I'm going on a date," she said, her voice smooth, steady, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "With someone else." The shock hit me like a physical blow. My heart raced as the words sunk in, each one cutting deeper than the last. A date? With another man? I stared at her, struggling to make sense of what she was saying, of what she had become. She wasn't the woman I thought I knew. The night that had started so ordinarily was now spiraling into something I could never have predicted. I finally managed to open my mouth, but nothing coherent came out. She didn't wait for me to find my voice. Instead, she kept talking, her tone sharp, almost cruel. "You don't pay attention anymore," she said, eyes narrowing as if I had committed some unforgivable crime. "Our life, your life, has become so predictable, so boring. Do you even see me anymore?" Her words hung in the air, heavy and damning. Each one another twist of the knife she'd plunged into me. She was right, and yet, the way she was choosing to prove it was devastating. I tried to respond, to defend myself. But all I could do was sit there, still too stunned to grasp the full weight of what was happening. Her intentions were clear. She was looking for something I hadn't given her in a long time, something raw, something thrilling. And she decided to find it elsewhere, with someone else. Without another word, Betsy turned on her heel and headed for the door, leaving me sitting there, staring at the empty space she'd just filled. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed through the house, and in that moment, everything seemed to collapse. The life I thought I had was gone, replaced by an unbearable silence. She was really gone. I sat there for what felt like hours, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. I could still hear the click of her heels in my mind, see the curve of her back as she walked away. And all I could think was, should I go after her? Should I fight for what was slipping through my fingers? But I didn't move. I couldn't. I was paralyzed by the shock, by the fear that no matter what I did, it wouldn't be enough. The house around me, once filled with a sense of familiarity, now felt foreign, like a place I didn't recognize. My life, my marriage, everything had changed in the space of a few minutes. And for the first time, I realized I had no idea what to do next. The silence after she left was deafening. I just sat there, staring at the door as if she might walk back through it at any moment, tell me it was all a mistake, a cruel joke. But the longer I sat, the clearer it became. She wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe properly, the air too thick, too heavy with what had just happened. How the hell did it get this far? I couldn't even process the idea that Betsy, my wife, had dressed herself up and walked out the door to meet another man. And worse, that she had no shame about it. There was no hesitation in her, no second thoughts. She wanted me to know. She wanted me to feel it. But why? Why provoke me like that? What did she expect me to do? Fall apart? Beg her to stay? Part of me felt that familiar pang of jealousy, that deep, gnawing pain in my gut at the thought of her with someone else, someone touching her in ways I hadn't in far too long. It made me sick to even think about it. But underneath that jealousy, something else stirred, something darker, more complicated. A cold anger, maybe. Or was it something closer to relief? A twisted kind of freedom in knowing that the facade was finally cracking. I stood up, my legs heavy, unsure what to do with myself. My hand drifted to my wedding ring, a symbol of a promise that now felt more like a lie. I slipped it off, almost without thinking, and placed it on the table. The sound of it hitting the wood echoed in the quiet room. It felt final, but I wasn't sure what it meant, if it was a surrender or a declaration of war. The house felt different now. The air was charged, and I could still smell her perfume lingering, the sweet, floral scent mixing with the bitterness rising inside me. My head was spinning, and I needed to get out. Staying here, in this space we had built together, now felt unbearable, suffocating. I grabbed my keys, barely aware of what I was doing, and left the house. No note, no explanations, just like her. The night was cool, and as I drove aimlessly through the empty streets, my mind raced. I replayed the moment over and over again. Her words, the way she looked at me so damn calm, as if it didn't matter what she was doing. Like I didn't matter. Maybe I didn't anymore. Or maybe that was what she wanted me to believe. I couldn't shake the image of her in that dress, the way it clung to her body. Was she wearing it now, as she met him? The thought sent a jolt of something through me, not just anger, but something primal. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was unsettling. The way my emotions twisted, jealousy and desire, rage and longing, all tangled up inside me. I pulled over to the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. What was I supposed to do? Just sit here and let this happen? Run after her? Show her that I wasn't some passive, predictable man she could walk all over? Or was this exactly what she wanted? To push me into some desperate act? The questions piled up, one after the other, and none of them had answers. All I knew was that Something had broken inside me the moment she walked out that door, and there was no going back. Whatever I did next would change everything. Who I was, who we were. But right now, I didn't care. All I knew was that when she came back, I wouldn't be the same man she left behind. As the hours passed, something inside me shifted. The shock and confusion that had paralyzed me earlier were fading, replaced by a cold, deliberate clarity. I wasn't going to sit back and wait for her to come home, smug and satisfied after her little adventure. No, I wasn't going to be the man she thought she could manipulate so easily. If she wanted to play this game, I'd show her how it's done. I drove back home, each mile making my decision clearer. She thought she could leave, flaunt her defiance in my face, and I would just be here, waiting like a fool. But Betsy had underestimated me. By the time she walked through that door, she would realize that the ground had shifted beneath her feet. When I got inside, the house was dark and quiet, but my mind was racing. I headed straight for the study, where I kept my laptop and logged into our shared accounts. It didn't take long to start moving things around. A few clicks, and half of our savings were now safely out of her reach. I could almost imagine the look on her face when she found out. The thought sent a sharp thrill through me. She wanted to provoke me? Well, now she'd see the consequences. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was the principle. For years, we had built this life together, shared everything. But tonight had made one thing clear. Betsy had no intention of honoring those bonds anymore. She had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to sit by and let her tear apart everything we had built without feeling the sting herself. As I worked, a cold satisfaction settled in my chest. This wasn't desperation, it was control. Betsy thought she held all the cards. But now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand. She wouldn't expect this. She was too caught up in her own game to see that I had already started playing mine. Next, I removed her from the health insurance. It was petty, sure, but it was another layer of protection for me, another signal to her that I wasn't the man she could walk all over anymore. If she wanted to take her life in a new direction, then she could do it without my support. Every step I took felt like I was reclaiming something, power maybe, or just a sense of dignity that had slipped away over the years. By the time I was finished, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, a quiet calm settling over me. The house was still, the only sound the hum of the laptop. She had no idea what she'd set in motion, and I wasn't sure I fully understood it either. But one thing was clear. When she came back, the man waiting for her wouldn't be the same. I closed the laptop, a strange sense of finality washing over me. It wasn't just about the money, the insurance, or the logistics of our life together. It was about something deeper. Betsy had tried to turn me into a spectator in my own life, but I wasn't going to play that role anymore. Not for her. Not for anyone. The silence in the house felt different now, not as suffocating, but heavy with a new kind of tension. I stood up, walked to the window, and stared out into the empty street, wondering how much longer it would be before she came home. Part of me still ached with the thought of what she was doing, where she was, but that ache was starting to fade. In its place was a growing resolve. Whatever happened next, I was ready. I wouldn't be the same man who sat stunned in that armchair, letting her words destroy him. I had taken control, and whether Betsy realized it or not, this was just the beginning. I had barely slept. The adrenaline from last night still pulsed through me, keeping me awake, alert. Every sound outside, every creak of the house, made me wonder if Betsy was finally coming home. But as the sun rose and the hours passed, there was no sign of her, just the quiet ticking of the clock, marking time that felt frozen. And then the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. My hand hovered over it, dreading what might come next, but something told me I needed to pick it up. When I did, it wasn't Betsy's voice on the other end. It was her mother. Her voice was tight with worry, and I could hear the strain, the urgency as she spoke. "Harvey called me last night," she began, her words coming fast, jumbled. He sounded off, distraught, like he was about to do something reckless. "I'm scared, Betsy. I think he might hurt himself." For a moment, I couldn't process what she was saying. Hurt myself? Was that what this looked like to them? A man losing his mind, spiraling into some kind of emotional breakdown? I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but the sound caught in my throat. The weight of her fear hit me harder than I expected. It hadn't crossed my mind how my actions, my sudden withdrawal of money, cutting off access to the insurance, might look to the people around us. I had been so caught up in the satisfaction of turning the tables on Betsy, I hadn't considered how it would seem from the outside. Now, they were worried I might do something extreme. "Look," I finally said, trying to keep my voice calm, even as my heart raced. "I'm fine. Really. There's no need to worry." But her mother wasn't convinced. I could hear it in her voice, the way she hesitated, unsure whether to believe me or to keep pushing. "Harvey, you've been through a lot, and Betsy told me what's been going on. You don't have to handle this alone. Please just don't do anything rash." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, trying to take control of my life, and everyone thought I was falling apart. But I couldn't explain to her the truth of what I was feeling, the strange, cold clarity that had settled over me. How could I? To them, it probably looked like I was losing my grip. To me, it felt like the opposite. I was finally waking up. "I'm not going to hurt myself," I said, more firmly this time. "I've just made some decisions. Betsy needs to deal with the consequences of her actions, just like I've been dealing with mine." Her mother fell silent for a long moment. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could almost feel her weighing my words. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice softer now, but still laced with concern. "Okay, Harvey, but promise me you'll talk to someone. Don't go through this alone." I made some vague promise I had no intention of keeping, just to get her off the phone. When I hung up, I felt the weight of her words pressing down on me. It wasn't just about me and Betsy anymore. Other people were watching, worrying, waiting for something to break. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe I had gone too far. As I paced through the house, I couldn't shake the conversation from my mind. Was this how Betsy would see me now too? A man who had lost control. The thought sent a chill through me. She wanted me to react, to fight for her, or to crumble in despair, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of either. I was playing my own game now. But still, there was a part of me that couldn't ignore the rising tension in my chest. What if this wasn't about control anymore? What if it had become something darker? I stared at the phone, half expecting it to ring again, to deliver some final piece of bad news. The kind that changed everything. But the house remained quiet, eerily so, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. And so was I. The call came late in the afternoon, just as I was beginning to feel the weight of the last 24 hours. I had been pacing around the house, lost in my thoughts, when the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Betsy's mother. It was the police. "Mr. Harvey, we need to inform you that there's been an accident." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. An accident? They kept talking, but I only caught fragments of what they were saying. Something about my truck, a crash, the hospital. My mind struggled to keep up, to understand. Was this real? Had I really been in an accident? But the truth settled in soon enough. I had left the house last night, driving aimlessly, trying to clear my head, but I hadn't gone far. The police told me I had crashed on a deserted stretch of road not far from home. They found me unconscious, pulled me from the wreckage, and now I was lying in a hospital bed in a coma. The weight of those words hit me like a punch to the gut. A coma. My mind raced, trying to grasp the absurdity of it all. How could this be happening? I felt perfectly fine. I was standing here, listening to them tell me that I was lying in a hospital bed, hovering between life and death. But that wasn't possible, was it? "Mr. Harvey, are you still there?" The officer's voice pulled me back to the present, and I realized I hadn't responded. I muttered something, trying to sound calm, But my thoughts were spiraling out of control. How could I be here and there at the same time? It wasn't until they mentioned Betsy that the full weight of the situation hit me. "Your wife has been notified," the officer said. "She's already at the hospital." Betsy. My pulse quickened at the mention of her name. She was there, by my side, probably in shock, wondering what had happened to her husband. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had walked out on me, left me to deal with the fallout of her betrayal, and now she was sitting at my bedside, probably filled with guilt and regret. But what did I feel? I wasn't sure. The rage that had simmered inside me for so long was still there, but it was tangled up with something else now. Something darker, heavier. The idea of her sitting there, worrying, waiting, after everything she'd done. It gave me no satisfaction. Instead, it only deepened the hollow feeling in my chest. As the hours passed, the reality of the situation began to settle in. This wasn't just a game anymore. My actions, her actions, the way we had hurt each other, it had all led to this. And now, here I was, trapped in this strange limbo, unable to move forward, unable to go back. It was as if everything had been put on pause, but the consequences of our choices were still unfolding, just beyond my reach. I could imagine Betsy's face as she sat in the sterile hospital room, staring at the machines, wondering if I would ever wake up. Did she regret pushing me? Did she realize now that her provocation had gone too far? Or was she still trying to convince herself that this was what she wanted all along? The thought gnawed at me, a bitter reminder of how far we had fallen. But there was something else, too. As I stood there, imagining myself lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if I never woke up. Would this be the end of us? A tragic, unfinished chapter in a story that had been falling apart for years? Or would this be the beginning of something new? Something darker, more final? The longer I thought about it, the more the lines between reality and imagination blurred. Maybe, in some twisted way, this was what I deserved. Maybe this was the punishment for letting things get this far, for not fighting hard enough to save what we had before it all came crashing down. But then again, maybe it was just another test, a chance to rewrite the ending. If I ever woke up, when I finally woke up, everything felt distant, as if I were watching my life through a fog. My body ached, my head throbbed, and the sterile smell of the hospital room was suffocating. I blinked a few times, trying to adjust to the harsh light. It took me a moment to realize where I was, to understand what had happened. And when I did, the first face I saw was hers. Betsy. She was sitting by the bed, her eyes red and swollen, as if she hadn't slept in days. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, her lips pressed together in a thin line, and for the briefest moment, I saw a flicker of something that looked like guilt. Regret, maybe, or fear, but none of it mattered anymore, because the moment our eyes met, I knew what I had to do. She didn't deserve to know what was going on inside my head, didn't deserve the satisfaction of thinking she had any hold over me. So, I played the part. I let the confusion wash over my face, let the silence stretch on just long enough for her to believe it. Who are you? The words came out slowly, thick with disorientation. I watched her face change, the color draining from her cheeks as the realization hit her. She stood up suddenly, a hand flying to her mouth in shock. You don't remember me? Her voice was a whisper, fragile, as if saying it out loud would break her. But I didn't break. I held her gaze, kept my expression blank, unreadable. I don't remember anything. It wasn't true. I remembered everything, every word she had said before she walked out the door, every cruel, deliberate choice she made. I remembered the cold, calculated moves I had made after she left. And I remembered the crash, the sense of spinning out of control, the split second before everything went black. But she didn't need to know that. Her reaction was immediate. I could see the panic flash in her eyes, the way her body tensed. She reached out, as if she might touch me, but then pulled back, unsure. Harvey, it's me. It's Betsy, your wife. There was something desperate in her voice now, a trembling vulnerability that hadn't been there before. She had been so confident, so sure of herself when she left me behind to meet another man. But now she was looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was slipping away from her. And maybe I was. The thought gave me a strange sense of power, a quiet satisfaction. She had tried to provoke me, tried to tear me down, but now the tables had turned. She was the one afraid of losing control. And I was more than willing to let her believe that everything she thought she knew about me, about us, was gone. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice soft, barely audible. I don't know who you are." Betsy sank back into the chair, her face pale, her fingers trembling as they gripped the armrests. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, the realization that this wasn't something she could fix easily. The power she thought she had over me was slipping through her fingers. For the first time in months, I felt in control. Over the next few days, I let the lie grow. I pretended not to remember the life we had shared, the years we had spent together. I let her explain it all to me, as if it were some distant story that I couldn't quite connect to. I watched her try to navigate the guilt, the confusion, the fear that she had pushed me too far. And it wasn't just her. Our daughters came to see me, their faces filled with worry, trying to coax some flicker of recognition from me. They even told me about the night Betsy left, about how the date with the other man never happened, that it was all just a stunt to get my attention, a failed attempt to reignite something between us. But I played my part well, nodding along, keeping my emotions carefully hidden. What none of them knew was that I wasn't the same man I had been before the accident. That man, the one who would have forgiven, who would have tried to piece things back together, he was gone. And in his place was someone colder, someone who had learned how to play the game. As the days went by, I could see the toll it was taking on Betsy. She still clung to hope, still believed that I might remember her, that we could rebuild what had been shattered. But I wasn't going to let her off that easily. This was my turn to watch her squirm, to make her feel the same helplessness I had felt. Maybe one day I'd tell her the truth. Maybe I'd let her know that I remembered everything, that I had been fully aware of every choice she made. But for now, I'd let her live in this uncertainty. Let her wonder if the man she once knew would ever come back. Because I knew the answer, and I wasn't ready to give it to her just yet. The day finally came when Betsy and I sat across from each other, the weight of everything that had happened hanging thick in the air between us. The sterile office, with its beige walls and cold, impersonal decor, felt like the perfect backdrop for what we were about to do, discuss the end of us. It was inevitable, wasn't it? We had been circling this moment for months, maybe even years. And now, here we were. Betsy's eyes flickered over to me, hesitant, searching for something. I could see the exhaustion etched into her face, the lines of worry that hadn't been there before. She looked like someone who had been carrying too much for too long, and I almost felt a pang of something, sympathy maybe, but it passed quickly. I reminded myself why we were here, reminded myself of the lies, the betrayal, the game she had played. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral as the lawyer laid out the terms of the divorce. Property, finances, everything that had once been shared between us was now being split down the middle. But none of that mattered to me. What mattered was the look in Betsy's eyes when she realized that this was it. There was no turning back. When the lawyer paused, Betsy finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost pleading. "Harvey, do you really think this is the only way? Can't we? I mean, after everything, can't we try to fix this?" I met her gaze, feeling that cold satisfaction rise in me again. She still thought there was something left to salvage, still believed that there was a chance for redemption. But I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Not after what she had done. "Fix what, Betsy?" I said, my voice low but steady. "What exactly are we supposed to fix? The lies? The games? The fact that you walked out on me and expected me to just..." What? Wait for you to come back. She flinched at my words, her eyes filling with something close to regret. It wasn't like that, Harvey. You have to believe me. I never actually went on that date. It was all just to what? Get my attention. I cut her off, leaning forward now, feeling the heat rise in my chest. Well, congratulations. You got my attention. And now look where we are. The room went silent. I could feel the tension, the weight of every unspoken word hanging between us. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together nervously, as if she were trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. Maybe this was her last-ditch effort to salvage whatever was left of our marriage. But for me, it was too late. I never wanted this to happen, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. You were so distant, so gone. I thought maybe if I pushed you, you'd... Her words trailed off, and I felt a flicker of something in my chest. But it wasn't sympathy. It was anger, the kind that simmered just beneath the surface, waiting to boil over. I had been distant, maybe, but that didn't excuse what she had done, how she had chosen to break me down rather than try to build something back up. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. You don't get to rewrite this, Betsy. You don't get to act like this was just some desperate plea for attention. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted to hurt me, and you did. She looked up at me then, her eyes wide and wet, and for a moment, I thought she might argue, might try to convince me that she hadn't meant it, that she hadn't wanted to cause this much damage. But she didn't. Instead, she nodded slowly, accepting the weight of my words. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant for it to go this far, but her apology meant nothing to me now. It was too late for that. Too late for regrets and half-hearted attempts to fix what was already broken beyond repair. We had crossed too many lines, and there was no coming back from it. Not for us. I know, I said, my voice cold, distant. But it did. There was a finality in those words, a sense that everything we had once shared was now reduced to ashes. Betsy's face crumpled slightly, as if she were on the verge of breaking, but she held it together, nodding quietly as the lawyer continued with the terms of the divorce. We were just two people sitting in a room, divided by the choices we had made, the lives we had destroyed. When the meeting was over, Betsy stood up slowly, hesitating for a moment as if she wanted to say something more. But whatever words she had left, they stayed buried. Instead, she walked out of the room without looking back, leaving me to sit in the silence. And for the first time, I realized that the man she had married, the man who would have fought to save this marriage, to fix what was broken, was truly gone. And maybe, just maybe, I was okay with that. A week after our meeting with the lawyer, Betsy came to me with a proposal. I wasn't expecting it. In fact, I wasn't expecting to hear from her at all after the way we had left things. But there she was, standing in my doorway, holding a manila envelope in her hands, her face pale and serious. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I wanted to tell her no, to close the door and walk away, but there was something in her eyes that stopped me. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the weight of everything we hadn't said. Or maybe it was just curiosity. Curiosity about what she thought she could still salvage after all this. I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. We sat in silence for a few moments, the tension between us as thick as ever. She placed the envelope on the table in front of me, but didn't open it right away. Instead, she looked at me, really looked at me, as if searching for some trace of the man she used to know. "Harvey, I know things between us have been difficult," she began, her voice tentative. "But I've been thinking. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back, but I still want to try." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest, watching her carefully. "Try what exactly?" She swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. "I want us to have another chance, and I'm willing to risk everything to prove to you that I mean it." She slid the papers across the table toward me. I glanced down, my eyes narrowing as I skimmed the words at the top of the page. It was a prenuptial agreement, a new one. "I know you don't trust me anymore," she continued, her voice shaking. "I know you think I'll hurt you again, but if I do, if I ever betray you like that again, you'll get everything. The house, the money, everything we've built together. It'll all be yours." I looked up from the papers, my mind spinning. This was her grand gesture? A last-ditch effort to show me that she was serious about fixing things? I didn't know whether to laugh or be angry. Did she really think that money was what this was about? That a legal document could somehow repair the damage that had been done between us? "This is what you think will fix things?" I asked, my voice calm but cold. "You think signing away your half of everything will make me forget what you did? What we become?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, shaking her head. "No, Harvey, I don't think it'll fix everything. But it's a start. It's a way to show you that I'm willing to take the risk, to show you that I'm serious about us. I don't want to lose you." I stared at her, trying to decide what to make of all this. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she had finally realized what she'd done and was genuinely trying to make amends. But another part of me, the colder, more cynical part, wondered if this was just another one of her games. Another way to manipulate the situation to her advantage. "You're willing to give up everything, huh?" I said, my voice laced with skepticism. "All to prove what? That you're sorry." She nodded, her eyes pleading with me to understand. "Yes, I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. Harvey, I know I've made mistakes, but I want to try again. I want to fix what we've lost." I picked up the papers, flipping through them slowly, my mind racing. I could feel her watching me, waiting, hoping for some sign that I might agree, that I might still care enough to try. But as I read through the agreement, all I could think about was how far we had fallen, how this legal document was now the symbol of our broken marriage. I tossed the papers back onto the table and leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. "You really think a piece of paper is going to change anything? That I'll just sign this and magically everything will be okay?" Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of hope die in her eyes. But she didn't back down. "No, I don't think it'll fix everything, but it's a start, a way for us to rebuild. Please, Harvey, just give it a chance." I sat back, studying her. The woman sitting in front of me now seemed different from the one who had left me for another man just weeks ago. Maybe it was the guilt. Maybe it was a fear of losing everything. But there was something raw in her now, something that almost felt real. But was it enough? Was there still something left worth saving? I ran a hand over my face, exhaling slowly. "I'll think about it," I finally said, my voice heavy with the weight of everything that still hung between us. She nodded, her shoulders sagging slightly in relief. "That's all I'm asking. Just think about it." Betsy stood up then, pausing for a moment as if she wanted to say more, but whatever was left to be said remained unspoken. She walked to the door, hesitating briefly before leaving, the soft click of the door closing behind her echoing in the stillness of the room. I sat there for a long time, staring at the prenuptial agreement, feeling the weight of her offer pressing down on me. It was a bold move, maybe even a genuine one. But as much as I wanted to believe that this could be a turning point, something inside me held back. Because even if I signed that paper, even if I gave her the chance she was asking for, would I ever really be able to trust her again? We didn't rush into it. After I told her I'd think about the prenuptial agreement, Betsy gave me space. Days passed, and slowly, we started talking again. Small, careful conversations about the kids, about the house, about things that didn't hurt too much to touch. It felt strange, like navigating a minefield, never sure which step might set off an explosion that would tear us apart for good. But we tried. I could see the effort in her eyes, in the way she softened her tone, the way she reached out to touch my arm when she thought I might let her. There was a tentative hope in her gestures, like she believed that if she was gentle enough, careful enough, she might coax me back into her orbit. And maybe a part of me wanted that too. Maybe a part of me still remembered what it was like before everything fell apart. Before the lies, the betrayals, the anger. We had been happy once, hadn't we? There had been a time when I would have done anything to keep her close, to protect what we had built. But that was a long time ago, and the man I had become wasn't so sure he wanted to go back to the way things were. We started spending more time together, small, insignificant moments that felt monumental given where we had been. A dinner here, a walk there. She tried to laugh at my jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. And I tried to meet her halfway, tried to pretend that this version of us could work, that there was something worth salvaging. But it was always there, the distance. No matter how hard we tried to act like things were getting better, there was an invisible wall between us. When I looked at her, I still saw the woman who had walked out on me, the woman who had dressed up to meet another man while I sat there, blindsided by her cruelty. And when she looked at me, I could feel the weight of her guilt, the way she was waiting for me to finally let her off the hook. But I couldn't, not yet, maybe not ever. One night, we tried for something more. We had been sitting on the couch, the TV flickering in the background, neither of us really watching. The air was thick with unspoken tension, and I could feel it building between us, the need to bridge the gap that had grown so wide. Betsy shifted closer, her knee brushing against mine. She hesitated, then reached out, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "Harvey," she whispered, her voice soft, pleading. "I miss you." I turned to look at her, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see it in her eyes, the desperation, the need for things to go back to the way they were. She was waiting for me to make the next move, to close the space between us, to take her back. But even as I leaned in, even as my body responded to hers, there was a part of me that held back, a part of me that remembered the way she had pushed me away, the way she had looked at me that night with ice in her eyes, as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. Still, I kissed her, soft at first, tentative, testing the waters. She responded immediately, her lips warm against mine, her hands sliding up to cradle my face as if she were afraid I might disappear if she let go. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, it felt familiar, like slipping back into something that had once been comfortable, safe. But it didn't last. The more I tried to lose myself in her, the more I felt the distance between us, the hollow space where trust should have been. My hands faltered, and I pulled back, the moment crumbling as quickly as it had begun. Betsy's eyes searched mine, confused, hurt. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know," I muttered. It doesn't feel right." She sat back, her shoulders slumping as the realization hit her. We were trying so hard, but it wasn't enough. No matter how many times we tried to recreate the intimacy we had lost, it always slipped through our fingers, leaving us more broken than before. "I'm sorry," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can." I wanted to tell her that it wasn't her fault, that maybe we were both too damaged, too far gone to make it work. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the floor, feeling the weight of her words settle over me like a heavy blanket. The truth was, I didn't know if we could fix it either. We had spent so long hurting each other, playing games, building walls, that now, when it mattered most, we couldn't find our way back. The cracks in our marriage were too deep, too wide to repair with just a few tender moments and whispered apologies. But still, we tried, because what else was there to do? Things had been tense for days, but we were trying, really trying, to make it work. The small gestures, the careful conversations, the attempts at intimacy that felt more like rehearsals than anything real. I thought we were making progress, slow as it was. But that illusion shattered one afternoon when I came home earlier than usual. I wasn't expecting to find anyone there except Betsy. The kids were out, and I thought maybe we'd have some quiet time together, maybe try to talk again or just sit in the silence we'd grown so used to. But when I walked through the door, I saw her, and she wasn't alone. A woman I didn't recognize, Amanda, I would later find out, was standing with Betsy in the living room. They were close, talking in hushed tones, and there was a strange tension in the air. I stopped in my tracks, my stomach twisting with the familiar dread that I had tried to push down for weeks. Before I could say anything, Betsy looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Harvey, you're home early," she said, her voice strained. Amanda turned, a polite smile on her face, but I could feel the cold rush of suspicion clawing its way up my spine. Something about the way they were standing there, the way Betsy's face paled as I stepped further into the room, triggered the anger I had kept bottled up for so long. The words came out before I could stop them, sharp and biting. "What's going on?" I demanded, my eyes flicking between the two of them. "Who is she?" Betsy's face crumpled, panic flashing across her features. "Harvey, it's not what you think. It never is it?" I snapped, cutting her off. The bitter taste of betrayal churned in my gut. All the memories of her leaving, her meeting another man coming flooding back. "Who is she? Are we doing this again?" Amanda's polite smile faltered, and she glanced at Betsy, clearly uncomfortable. "I should go," she muttered, grabbing her bag and heading for the door. "I'll call you later." But I wasn't done. "No! I want to know what's going on here. Why is she in my house? What exactly am I walking into this time?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Betsy's lips parted, but no words came. Her hands were shaking, and I could see her scrambling for an explanation, something to defuse the situation. But I didn't want explanations. I wanted the truth, or at least something that made sense in the mess we had created. "She's a colleague," Betsy finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were just working on something for the office. That's it, I swear." But I didn't believe her. How could I? After everything that had happened, after the lies, after the secrets, how was I supposed to believe that this was just a casual visit, a work meeting? The familiar ache of jealousy burned in my chest, clouding my thoughts. "You expect me to believe that?" I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You seriously think I'm going to fall for this again?" Her eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling at her sides. "Harvey, please. I'm telling you the truth. There's nothing going on." But it didn't matter. I was already too far gone, too deep into the memories of the night she had walked out, the night she had made me feel like a fool. The woman who had pushed me away, who had flaunted her independence, her desire for someone else, was standing here now, asking me to trust her. And I couldn't. I wouldn't. "I can't do this, Betsy," I said, my voice hardening. "I can't keep playing this game with you. Every time I think we're getting somewhere, every time I try to let go, you pull me right back into this mess." She stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "Harvey, it's not a game. I'm not lying. Please, just listen to me." But I wasn't listening. I had already made up my mind, the walls going up faster than I could tear them down. "You're right," I said bitterly. "It's not a game. It's a joke. And I'm done being the punchline." Betsy's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might break down completely. But instead, she stood there, silent, watching as I walked out the door, the weight of everything unsaid dragging behind me. As I drove away, the anger that had flared so brightly began to dim, replaced by a hollow ache in my chest. Was I overreacting? Had I let my own paranoia destroy what little progress we had made? Maybe. But after everything we had been through, after everything she had done, how was I supposed to trust her again? The truth was, I didn't know. And maybe, deep down, I didn't want to. Days passed in a blur after that last confrontation. Betsy didn't reach out, and I didn't make the effort either. The silence between us, once filled with attempts at reconnection, now felt like an unspoken agreement. We had both tried, and we had both failed. The walls we had built were too high, too thick, and there was no tearing them down anymore. I thought about what had happened with Amanda, about the way I had reacted, the anger that had flared up so easily, the way I had stormed out. Part of me knew I had overreacted, that I had let the weight of our past poison what might have been a simple misunderstanding. But the other part of me, the part that had been wounded for so long, couldn't let go of the distrust that had settled into my bones. It didn't matter what Betsy said or did now. Something had broken between us, something that couldn't be fixed with apologies or promises. A few days later, the divorce papers arrived. Betsy's signature was already on them, her name scrawled in familiar handwriting that made my chest tighten. This was it, the end, the formal, legal conclusion to everything we had once been. I stared at the papers for what felt like hours, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I should have felt something, anger, sadness, relief, but all I felt was an empty, quiet resignation. Maybe that was the real tragedy of it all. After everything we had been through, all the love, the hurt, the betrayal, I was left with nothing but a dull acceptance that this was how it was always going to end. I picked up a pen and signed my name next to hers. It didn't feel final, not the way I thought it would. There was no dramatic closure, no sense of liberation, just a quiet acknowledgement that our story had run its course. When I dropped the papers off at the lawyer's office, I didn't feel the need to call Betsy. There was nothing left to say. We had spent months, maybe years, trying to navigate the wreckage of our marriage, trying to convince ourselves that there was still something worth saving. But in the end, it was all just rubble, too broken to rebuild. I drove aimlessly for a while after that, the city passing by in a blur. I thought about what Betsy and I had once shared, how we had built a life together, how we had laughed and loved and fought and hurt each other in ways I never could have imagined. We had been partners, lovers, enemies. And now we were nothing. Just two people walking away from the ashes of what we had tried so hard to hold on to. I pulled over to the side of the road, staring out at the horizon as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the pavement. The sky was streaked with oranges and pinks, the kind of sunset that used to make me feel something, a sense of awe, of peace, of connection to the world around me. But tonight, it just felt like another ending. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I thought about what came next. A new chapter, I supposed. A new life, without Betsy, without the weight of everything we had been through. It felt strange, the idea of moving forward without her, but it also felt inevitable. We had fought too hard, hurt each other too deeply, and now there was nothing left but to let go. I sat there for a long time, watching the last light of the day fade away, feeling the weight of the past lift slowly from my shoulders. It wasn't the ending I had imagined when we first fell in love, but it was the ending we had created together. And maybe, in the end, that was enough.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.